In November 1963, a 6-year-old girl somehow made it onto the stage where the Beatles were performing and walked straight up to Paul McCartney. When she hugged him and said something that the microphone caught, the entire venue fell silent, and all 4 Beatles were visibly moved to tears. What could a little girl possibly say that would break down 4 of the world's biggest rock stars in front of thousands of people? The air backstage at the Prince of Wales Theatre is thick with cigarette smoke and nervous energy. It's November 1963, and London feels electric with an energy the older generation doesn't quite understand yet. 4 young men from Liverpool huddle in a cramped dressing room that smells of hair pomade and sweat-stained velvet. Paul McCartney stands in front of a spotted mirror. Adjusting his tie for the 3rd time, his hands won't stop shaking. John Lennon sprawls in a wooden chair, one leg draped over the armrest, tapping ash into a teacup. "Relax, would you? It's just another gig." But his voice carries an edge that betrays him. This isn't just another gig. Tonight they'll perform for the Queen Mother, for lords and ladies, for the people who never gave boys like them a second glance. George Harrison picks at his guitar strings without plugging in, creating a hollow metallic sound that punctuates the tension. Ringo sits quietly, drumming his fingers against his thighs in a rhythm only he can hear. Outside the dressing room, footsteps echo down the corridor. Voices carry, some posh and clipped, others rougher, working class like their own. Paul can hear the orchestra warming up somewhere above them, violins and cellos playing scales that sound almost mournful. It's a different world here, one where music comes wrapped in tuxedos and tradition, where people applaud politely instead of screaming until their voices break. A stagehand pokes his head through the door. 5 minutes, lads. Oh, and there's some kids from the Children's Hospital in the front rows. Special guests of Her Majesty. Thought you'd want to know. The door closes before anyone can respond. Paul catches his reflection again. 21 years old and exhausted beyond what sleep can cure. The screaming has become so constant it's like living inside a hurricane. Every hotel, every street, every second consumed by hands reaching, voices demanding, cameras flashing. He thinks about the morning papers, the ones calling them a passing fad. The critics who dismiss them as noise merchants for teenagers. Tonight they have to prove something, not just to the royals but to themselves. That they're more than 4 lads who got lucky. That the music means something beyond the merchandise and the hysteria. Paul's reflection stares back at him, and he barely recognizes the person looking out from behind those familiar eyes. The call comes. They file down a narrow corridor lined with photographs of performers who came before. Music hall stars, comedians, jugglers, faces from another era, frozen in time, watching them pass with expressions that seem to ask if they're ready for what comes next. Paul wonders if any of them felt this strange mixture of terror and exhilaration, if any of them lost themselves in the performance and forgot how to come back. They reach the wings and the sound hits them like a physical force. The crowd's anticipation becomes a living thing that seems to pull all the oxygen from the air. Through a gap in the curtain, Paul can see the royal box, the glittering jewels, the perfect posture of people who've never had to worry about anything. He sees the children too, small faces in the front rows, some in wheelchairs, others with bandages visible beneath their Sunday best. John leans close and mutters his plan to tell the cheap seats to clap, and the wealthy to rattle their jewellery. Paul manages a smile, but his mind is elsewhere. Somewhere back in Liverpool, in a memory of his mother at the kitchen table telling him music was the most honest thing a person could give the world. The curtain begins to rise, the screams explode. Paul steps into the light, and the boy from Allerton disappears behind the smile everyone expects. But tonight, the air feels different, heavier somehow, like the universe is holding its breath, waiting for what none of them can see coming. The lights are hotter than Paul remembers, or maybe it's just that he's been running on 3 hours of sleep for the past 4 months. They tear into From Me to You, and the muscle memory takes over. Fingers on strings, voice-hitting harmonies he could sing in his sleep. But behind the performance, behind the 1,000-watt smile, his mind splinters into fragments of everything he's carrying. This morning a letter arrived from his Aunt Millie. Simply news from home, she'd written, but tucked inside was a mass card for the anniversary of his mother's death. Mary McCartney, who died when Paul was 14, who never got to see any of this. He'd shoved it in his jacket pocket and tried not to think about it. but standing here under lights that feel like judgment, he can feel the weight of that card against his chest. Would she be proud, or would she tell him to come home, that fame isn't worth losing yourself? The song ends and George stumbles slightly during the transition, fatigue making his fingers clumsy. Paul catches his eye, and they share a look that needs no words. They're drowning in this. Last week a girl threw herself at their car and Paul watched her body roll across the hood. The driver didn't even slow down. They're animals, the manager said. But Paul saw her face, saw the desperation that looked uncomfortably like his own. Between songs, the venue throbs with energy. Paul can feel it pressing against him from all sides. This need that the audience projects onto four boys who are barely holding it together. The spotlight makes everything else disappear into darkness, and he suddenly understands how easy it would be to forget there's a world beyond this stage, to believe the illusion that they're somehow superhuman, immune to the ordinary struggles that plague everyone else. John announces the next number with his trademark wit, but Paul notices how his hand trembles slightly on the microphone. They're all pretending. Pretending they're not exhausted, pretending this is sustainable, pretending they can still recognize themselves in the mirror. The newspapers call Paul the cute one, the charming one, and somewhere along the way he's become a prisoner of that description. Every genuine emotion now feels like it might shatter the carefully constructed image that sells records and fills venues. He thinks about yesterday, trying to buy groceries and being mobbed so badly the police had to intervene, about the hotel rooms that all look the same, the cities that blur together, the faces that want pieces of him he doesn't know how to give anymore. About writing all my loving on a tour bus at dawn because sleep wouldn't come, trying to capture authenticity in 3 minutes of melody and verse. They launch into twist and shout, and Paul pours everything into his backing vocals. The audience sees four boys having the time of their lives. They don't see John's voice as raw from singing 8 shows in 6 days. They don't see the bruises on Ringo's hands from drumming too hard to feel something real. They don't see George's hollow eyes from the sleeping pills that stopped working 2 months ago. They don't see Paul, who writes songs about love at 3 a.m, because he can't remember what normal human connection feels like anymore. The song builds to its climax, and somewhere in the chaos of performance, Paul realizes he's forgotten how to be just a person. Everything is a show now. Everything is for them. The audience, the press, the people who own pieces of him he'll never get back. He can feel his mother's mass card in his pocket, a small rectangle of paper that weighs more than it should. The final note rings out and the applause washes over them like a wave. Paul smiles and bows, and somewhere deep inside a part of him wonders if this is what suffocating feels like. If this is what it means to have everything and nothing all at once. The applause fades. John steps to the microphone, ready to introduce their final number, when a ripple moves through the front rows. At first it's barely noticeable, just a shift in the sea of faces, but then Paul sees it. A small figure, moving with the determination only children possess when they've set their mind to a task. A girl, no more than 6 years old, slips past a security guard who's too busy watching the stage to notice her. She's tiny blonde hair in pigtails, and she's walking straight toward them. The screaming doesn't stop immediately. It happens in waves, section by section, as people realize an unscripted moment is unfolding. The girl reaches the stage and with surprising strength pulls herself up. She's at knee height, this little person in a world of giants, and she's looking directly at Paul. Security finally notices, 2 men in uniforms moving toward her, but John raises his hand. Stop. Let her come. Time does something strange. The Prince of Wales. Theatre packed with thousands of people becomes silent like Paul has never witnessed. Not quiet, but silent. The kind of silence that feels like the world has paused to take a breath. The girl walks across the stage, her small shoes making soft sounds against the wood, and she doesn't look afraid. She looks like she's on a mission. Paul doesn't think. He moves instinctively, dropping to his knees so he's at her eye level. His heart is hammering, but everything else has gone still. The girl stops in front of him and without hesitation wraps her small arms around his neck. She holds on tight, the way children do when they mean it, and Paul's arms come up automatically to return the embrace. He can feel her breathing, can smell the soap in her hair, and for a moment he's not a Beatle. He's a person being hugged by a child. She pulls back and meets his gaze with eyes that seem too old for her face. The microphone is close enough to catch her voice when she speaks, and the venue's sound system carries her words to every corner of the theatre. "My mummy says you remind her of my brother. He's in heaven now. She says your music makes her remember him smiling." Paul's breath catches in his throat. The girl reaches into her pocket and pulls out a folded piece of paper, creased and worn like she's been carrying it for days. She unfolds it carefully and holds it up. It's a child's drawing. 4 crayon stick figures with instruments, surrounded by hearts and stars. "This is you making people happy," she says, her voice clear and certain. "Thank you." The paper trembles in Paul's hand. He stares at it, at the simple lines and bright colours, and his composure breaks open. His face crumbles. The careful mask he's been wearing for months, maybe years, just falls away. His eyes overflow and he doesn't try to stop it. Behind him, he hears John make a sound that might be a sob or might be beyond naming. When Paul glances back, John has turned completely away, his hand covering his mouth, shoulders shaking. George's guitar hangs forgotten in his hands, his face wet with emotion. Ringo has his head down, his gaze fixed on his drum kit like he's never seen it before, but his shoulders shake, betraying him. In the royal box, the Queen Mother lifts a handkerchief to her eyes. Throughout the theatre, people weep openly, strangers united in this moment of raw, unfiltered humanity. Paul turns his attention back to the little girl, who's watching him with a seriousness that children shouldn't have to carry. She knows loss, she knows grief, and yet she's here to tell him that his music matters, that it reaches into the darkest places and brings light. He can't speak. His throat has closed around all the words he wants to say. Paul's hands move before his mind catches up. He shrugs out of his suit jacket, the one he spent 20 minutes getting perfect, and drapes it around the little girl's shoulders. It swallows her, this garment made for a man wrapped around a child, and the gesture is so simple and so profound that a sound moves through the audience like a wave breaking. He leans close to her, his forehead almost touching hers, and whispers words that only she can hear. Whatever he says makes her smile, a real smile that transforms her solemn little face, and she nods. Paul kisses her forehead, gentle and reverent, as if she might break. Then he stands, taking her small hand in his, and walks her to the side of the stage. A woman is there, being held back by security, her hands pressed against her mouth. The moment she sees her daughter, she breaks through, falling to her knees and gathering the little girl into her arms. She's sobbing, this mother who sent her daughter on a mission of gratitude, and Paul crouches beside them. He speaks quietly to the woman, making her look at him with eyes full of more pain and more love than any person should have to hold. And she nods, clutching his hand briefly before letting go. Paul walks back to his bandmates, and he's not the cute Beatle anymore. He's not a performer or a product or a carefully constructed image. He's Paul McCartney from Liverpool, 21 years old, who just remembered what it feels like to be human. John's eyes are red. George has wiped his face, but the tears keep coming. Ringo looks at Paul with an expression beyond language. They don't discuss it. They don't need to. Paul picks up his bass and without a word counts them in. They begin to play All My Loving, but it's different now. The tempo is slower, more deliberate. Paul's voice, when he sings about pretending he's kissing the lips he's missing, carries a weight it never had before. This isn't a love song anymore. It's a prayer. It's a promise. It's 4 young men remembering that before they were famous, before they were anything. They were human beings capable of feeling and connecting and caring. John's harmony comes in, and his voice breaks on the word true, but he doesn't stop. George's guitar work is tender, each note placed with the care of someone handling something sacred. Ringo's drumming is soft, almost like a heartbeat, keeping them all anchored to the present. The audience stands, not because protocol demands it, but because the human spirit recognizes when it's witnessing grace. The Queen Mother is on her feet. Lords and ladies in diamonds and silk are on their feet. Screaming teenagers are on their feet. The mother, holding her daughter, is on her feet. Everyone in the Prince of Wales Theatre is standing, not for the Beatles, the phenomenon, but for 4 boys from Liverpool who stopped being performers long enough to hold space for grief, for loss, for the simple and profound truth that music connects us when words fail. The song ends, and the applause that follows isn't like the screaming that opened the night. It's deeper, fuller. the sound of thousands of people recognizing that they've witnessed something that can't be manufactured or marketed or sold. Paul sets down his bass and looks out at the sea of faces, and for the first time in months he feels like himself, not the image, not the product, just Paul. Years later, the drawing will hang in his home, a reminder of the night everything changed. He'll tell interviewers about it, his voice still catching when he describes the little girl who walked onto a stage and reminded him why any of this mattered. "We started playing music to connect," he'll say, "to comfort, to remind people they're not alone. That night, a 6-year-old girl reminded us of our own lesson. The little girl will grow up carrying that moment with her, the night 4 strangers showed her that vulnerability isn't weakness, but the bravest thing a person can offer. She'll become a music therapist, dedicating her life to helping others find healing in sound, in rhythm, in the universal language that transcends grief and loss and pain. And somewhere in the work she does, in every life she touches, the echo of that November night in 1963 continues, rippling outward like a stone thrown into still water, the circles spreading farther than anyone could have imagined.